The good news is I don't have a PowerPoint presentation to make. There are a lot of impacted people right at the back I can see with PowerPoints. It probably comes from where I work, Amazon, where we are not allowed to use PowerPoint presentations. Wow. You can't use PowerPoint presentations. So how do you communicate? By the written word. What we say is, a PowerPoint presentation is as good as the presenter. When Mali speaks to it, the same words look so much better than I could speak to it. The same with Venkat, the same with Anish and all of that. So Jeff Bezos basically said, you know what, let's have a methodology, a mechanism by which everybody understands everybody exactly the same way they're supposed to be understood. And then he said, no PowerPoints, not that he did not like Microsoft. We don't like Microsoft anyway. So, we keep losing people to them, they keep hiring people from us, so it's a lose-lose game anyway. And we said, let's do narratives. So what happens in Amazon is the first 30 minutes in a meeting, if you've been in meetings, there is no PowerPoint presentation, there is no somebody who stands up and says, okay, I'm going to take you through my idea. For the first 20-25 minutes, it's complete silence. So what are they doing? They're not praying, right? I mean, it's a pretty tough company to work in. I mean, you don't pray for a living. They're actually reading through a narrative, a document. And the document has to have a size to it, not the font. It can be maximum of 6 pages. It can be the world's best idea. It can be something you are asking Jeff Bezos to fund $20 billion for, or it can be something like, I want to make a pay raise for my hourly workers of 200 rupees a month or something. It can't be more than 6 pages. In those 6 pages, you're supposed to be able to put in data, not just words, data, a compelling argument, and then be able to answer questions from people who are reading it. Mind you, when you have 20 minutes to read something, you have that much more opportunity to ask questions. And then you got to be ready with it and then go on and on with it. So I said, okay, let me not use PowerPoint and stand up for being a true Amazonian. And it's not easy to be following such luminaries and speakers, and they have said all that you can hear from a VUCA world standpoint. So what I've been asked to speak about is how do you grow? How do you personally grow in a VUCA world? Now, I should admit this, shamelessly. Till I got invited to speak on this, I did not know what the acronym VUCA actually meant. I don't know how many of you knew it. I mean, everybody keeps using these words, and I said, okay, if I were to put my hand up and say, tell me what this VUCA means, and if the 100 people in the room, if there were 101, knew what it was, what a shame, So you don't even ask a question. So then I said to myself, okay, what do you do in a VUCA world to grow? Then I said to myself, the first answer that I will give is ask shamelessly. You don't know something, go ask. My son asks all the time. He says, Daddy, you're working from home today. I said, yeah. But what do you work? You always sit in your office, the door is closed, you're either on your laptop or on your phone. So you're probably typing or you're talking. Where are you working? I said, oh my God, this is a difficult question. And I said, so what is your theory of work? And he says, Mr. Peter Armstrong? I said, yeah, he's the principal of the school he goes to. Tall man, big man. And he works. So what does he do? He walks around the school all the time. One day he came and shook hands with me. The other day he smiled at me. Probably they say the same thing of you, principal. And he's working hard. There are some times in these gatherings you don't quite know why people appreciate what you're saying. And actually I said this in a very, very, positive, manner, and I want to come back to Rajagiri at some point in time, be an invitee of yours, and people are clapping for the wrong reasons here. Then I said to myself, so what did I go through? I've worked across many industries. I started working in a direct sales company for a short while after I graduated from Madras School of Social Work. That was Eureka Forbes. Even today, it's kind of well-revered direct sales company. And in day 3, the regional sales manager who I used to support gave me a very onerous task of putting together a sales training program. I said, you're a sales company, I'm day 2 in my job. Why are you asking me to put together a sales training program? He said, you know what? You should actually go on the field and see what people do. So I went on to the field. They were selling vacuum cleaners. So vacuum cleaners, you know what a vacuum cleaner is. It's supposed to clean, right? Using vacuum, it's supposed to clean. So then what are you supposed to sell that machine as? As a vacuum cleaner that will clean and make things clean. So there was this salesman who actually was selling it as a fire engine to a little kid. So how do you do that? He says, it's very easy. All you need to do is to have a little bit of petrol here, and then throw it up, and then throw the vacuum out here, and look at how it can fire. How dangerous. There was another one that actually said, this can be a rail engine. So how does that happen? You sit on this machine and keep dragging it, it becomes a rail engine. And then they said, this doesn't work. We are a company of high integrity, and we had to be, putting together. So we actually went and created training those days when there was no internet, when there was no nothing. You had to actually go physically shoot a good sale, a bad sale, and then we put together what was called a sales training program. And when we put together a trainer certification program and all of that, and I said, oh my God, we have arrived in life. And which is when, we figured out that there were 8 other products the company was selling, and we had to be doing all of that. And then we said, okay, so I said to myself, should I answer the headhunter call from Hindustan Lever, or just stay there putting together sales training programs? And I went into Hindustan Lever. And then, worked in manufacturing, and a lot of them, there are, big dada sitting here from Apollo Tires and all of that. Those days, again in my week 2 or something, in a large factory, which they gave me, and I was 23, 24 years old. That was about 100 years ago. And they gave me this job. I went and asked my boss. I said, they hired me as a sales HR manager, and I said, I don't want to do this. I want to be in a factory. So they said, this factory's job is around in Gatkesar. Anyone from AP here, Andhra Pradesh? It's on the Warangal Road. It was back at the beyond those days. It used to take 3 hours to go there. These days, I believe it's prime real estate. I don't know. I mean, I haven't invested in that. So what happened was, I was sitting there in my office. There was this man that was brought who was bleeding from top to bottom. 5 people around him. And there were 3 unions there. And they basically said, you're the new personnel manager here. Those days, there was no HR. Okay, personnel manager. Yeah, call the police, call the police. What do you mean call the police? This man is injured. You have to call the doctor. Why are you calling the police? No. The other union man beat him up, so he needs to get arrested. Call the police right now. I don't know what to do. They never taught me all this in Madras School of Social Work, I don't know if they teach you in Rajagiri, Center for Business Studies or not. I was just sitting there dazed, and there were no mobile phones then. I didn't know what to do. By then, police had arrived. Police was inside. There was lathi charge and all kinds of mayhem. And one thing I knew was, you can actually create a lockout situation. So that I had learned. So I went and told my factory manager, I said, let's lock this factory out now. He said, good idea, but do you know how to write a lockout letter? I said, I don't know, but let's write it. So we basically locked the factory out. We said, arson, violence and all of that, and we locked it out. And after about 40 days or so, there was this deputy labor commissioner, assistant labor commissioner, chief labor commissioner, all of them, they had their packet of tea and coffee and all of that going from us. And finally, they came with a tripartite agreement, and it all started off. So all the unions came, and we were in this room sitting and trying to, welcome all people back in. And I said something which I thought was very, very appropriate, much like I said when you all clapped for your principal. I basically said, you know what, if this is the way you guys are going to behave, this factory will get closed down. And then erupted another big thing. This personnel manager says he's going to close down the factory. Let's go on a strike now. And then I get a call from this boss of mine in Bangalore, Mr. Dave. He's still a good friend of mine. He says, Raj, we thought we sent you to create positive, factory engagement. We did not have huge dollars those days to go spend on entertainment. But here you're closing down the factory all the time. And then, it happened so that it eventually got closed down. So that's another example. From there, I went on to go launch manufacturing plants with Ford Motor Company. My grandmother still, I remember, asked me, she's a confidant. I mean, I can speak to her for hours together. And she will very patiently listen. And finally, at the end of it, she'll ask a very innocuous question, which you will actually bring all your energy sapping down completely, because you have missed the point for 60 full minutes. And she told me, I understand the first company you worked in was a short one. They were selling vacuum cleaner. I don't know, you could have actually used a broomstick. But you went to Hindustan Lever, it's a good thing. They made tea, they made coffee, they made toothpaste, they made jam, they made ketchups. So there was something. What is this automotive company? There is already Ambassador here, Fiat here. Why do you want to go and work for Ford Motor Company? Then I said, oh my God, so that's an interesting question. And after that, we went and launched. And I still remember one of the things that we tried to do there was to employ technicians. And we used all kinds of pyrotechnics, HR techniques, in terms of how do we test people and hire them in. And we put together some 8, 9, 10 different kinds of tests, including hand-eye coordination, how do you lift weights, everything other than being, how can you be Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger? So, and how do you hire 6,000 people like that? And then, Anand Mahindra used to be a joint venture partner. Then he came and said, why can't you simplify all these things, guys? Even I failed it. So we actually tested him on it. He was a joint venture partner, and he failed in the first test itself. We said, Mr. Mahindra, you have to be the chairman of the company. You can't be a technician, which is why you failed. But, so from there on, I was thinking about it, and I said, what changes? A lot of things do change, but some things don't change. Going to some of the world economies, there are some world-changing events that took place. 9/11 happened. I was in the United States that time. I used to work for GE, and we were in a class at that point of time, in Crotonville. And then, they said, this happened, this tower went down, and life was never the same thereafter. Jeff Immelt, who's currently the chairman of the company, chairman and CEO, had just taken over. He was just 2 weeks old in the job. He had taken over from another legendary person called Jack Welch. Welch was known for his gregarious personality and big stuff. And, Welch would basically say, mind you, I will write your performance appraisal myself and put my signature on it, which basically said you're doomed. And Immelt took over, and he basically said, I had a plane, engine of which was made by me. I had a building which my company had insured. I had people inside where my people were working, and all doomsday happened on just day one. And the company lost something like $600 million in one day, and their market cap dropped by I don't know how many billions of dollars. Now, world-changing events happen. Life is never the same. Now, going to the United States is not the same anymore. You need to, when you go through security, you probably remove everything other than your underpants. And if you had a name which has a certain religion in it, there you go. You will go through all kinds of things. I mean, it's all for the right thing. It's basically, helping us be safe and all of that. So with all these things, I said, what can I offer to this group that my other eminent speakers have already offered? And I said, let me pick up a few from the Amazon leadership principles, as we call them. We have a bunch of principles, much like vision statement, that many people have. And when I used to work for GE, I used to read those vision statements. They used to be really good, and they continue to be really good. Don't get me wrong. I used to think that what if I just took the GE logo off it and put IBM in it? You know what I mean? The vision statement that has the logo on the top. I said it'll read exactly the same. I mean, all these were written by consultants in McKinsey's and all of them using nice words, etc. Here I come to Amazon. Leadership principles, there are 14 of them, basically written in hand by people that are working in the company, and they make some enormous sense. One of them, and which I think is important for our growth story here, is about being vocally self-critical. What does that mean? Do you often tell yourself that you're really good at everything and the world is bad? Or you tell yourself that you are good at a few things, most of the time the world is good. which basically says that, you're good for nothing kind of thing. Now, the way the words write, and I'm not here to sing Amazon's praise, but just to make a point here in terms of vocally self-critical, it's all English words, but I try translating it to Tamil, my native tongue. It doesn't translate right. I speak Hindi, it doesn't translate right. In Malayalam, probably it will not translate right either. It basically says, leaders do not believe their or their team's body odor smells of perfume. Now, when you read it in English, you can understand it. But when you try translating it in Chinese, Mandarin, it just doesn't make sense. What this basically says is, if you think, you're perfect all the time, you're doomed. And, what do you continue to keep doing all the time? And I think, in order for us to personally grow, that's a big thing. We have to be, are we vocally self-critical? Can we criticize ourselves? Can we show a mirror to our own face and say, how ugly it is today, go better shave. If you're a man, that is, This is humor, guys, you can smile. Thank you. The second one I thought we want to do is earn trust of others. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you want to be good to everyone. It doesn't mean that you should always say yes to anything that your boss says. But it basically means you do things that increase your credibility. Now, credibility is another big word, right? People like Mali and Venkat and Anish and others have earned it over a period of time, a long period of time. And that's exactly what it takes, credibility. There are very, very simple things you can do which will basically eradicate every credible thing that you have done all your life. Not so simple things like Rajagopalan and others did, we all know, but simple things like, for example, try this. If you're married, and there are many married people in this room, okay, your wife, and if you're a man especially, your wife will find this almost immediately. Try reading your email and answering her phone call. And if she cannot tell you in 2 seconds, stop that laptop and speak to me, I'll change my word. That is credibility for you. So you're doing two things at a time. You're trying to speak. Yeah, I'll understand, I'll come for the movie, but you're trying to read Amazon leadership principle, that doesn't work. So earning trust of others comes with small, little things one by one. How many times do we tell people, I'll call you back in a minute? And that 1 minute never comes. It takes a day, it takes 10 days. If it's a HR recruiter you're trying to call, it can even take 1 year, and you will still not hear back from them. I don't want to take too long, but keep to my allocated 15 minutes, and I probably have about 2 minutes or so, 2 or 3 minutes. The third one I want to talk about is something we call or right a lot. What that basically says is, do you make the right calls most of the times? Not all the time. You don't have to be right every time, but you have to be right a lot. What that means is, when you're investing into something, and Bezos says this very nicely and very eloquently, and he has this laughter that goes along with it, and we don't want to ape it. But he basically says, when I started the internet, Amazon.com, at one point in time, it was his father's money. It was his family money that was invested in there. He basically told his family, they put in $300,000, all of them. He said, there are 80% chances this company will fail. And there are 20% chances this company will succeed. If you believe that 20%, and if you believe in me, you put the money in. But if you want your return tomorrow morning for the money that you put in, take your money away. So simple, isn't it? So simple. It's basically saying, I will stand personal guarantee for the money. At the same time, I want you to know that you're taking a risk putting money in. And that is what he says by being all right a lot. I mean, am I being right most of the times? Not all the time. We have made some big failures, and time will tell whether some of those will stand the test of time, etc. The last one I want to talk about is deliver results. You got to be able to deliver results all the time. Today it's instant gratification. Be it my 10-year-old son or the college master students at the back or my esteemed colleagues in the front. It's about results. How long will your CEO or your manager or your colleague or even your spouse be willing to listen to all the stories you will go about the rosy future tomorrow? You ought to be able to show results and how we do about it. For this, what is important is be willing to be misunderstood for a long period of time. You know what I mean? Be willing to be misunderstood for a long period of time. People are not going to understand your intent all the time. I'm sure when, Rajagiri colleges started, I don't know, 40 years ago, when the CMI institution started, people must have thought, what is this? Some education institute in some far-flung part of Kerala. You have taken 200 acres, so what does it mean? And then this comes and that comes, and then I saw the metallurgy lab today, and I was telling myself, my dad will be really happy. He was a metallurgist. He actually did not know why I was doing personnel management those days. It was HR, and then, after about 2 months of my college, he basically tapped my shoulder and he said, does it take 2 years for you to be a personal secretary? I said, no, I'm not studying for being a personal secretary. No, then what is this personnel management all about? So then I was saying, he must have been very, very pleased with what he did. So the thing is, when people invested money in those days into places like these, nobody was really going to give them a bang for the buck, right? When people leave, corporate careers and go on to teaching, you're not listened to all the time. So be willing to be misunderstood. It's okay. It's not arrogance. It's about saying, I know what I'm doing, and I know what I stand for, and I'm okay if you don't understand me today, you'll understand me tomorrow. And Bezos says this very rightly. He says, when I listed the company in 1997, nobody was willing to buy. The stock price, which was listed at $5, was going at 50 cents for a long time. And that's big investment in 1997, 50 cents. And when it became $1, they were all celebrating. Today, the stock is somewhere around $300 plus. Now, what this means is, as a shareholder, you are willing to stand by someone who says, please give me some more time. I'm okay if you don't understand me today, but you'll understand it. End of the day, if it is $1 and it is $300, the difference is a lot, right? And if you're sitting on 1,000 shares, that's a lot of money. And with that, I want to just close with a small story that I heard from a very learned man. Sadhguru is what he goes by. I think he's got another name too. He gave the story of a pheasant. A pheasant, a bird. And there was this pheasant, who was in a farm. He had gotten a little fat, and he couldn't fly anymore. And he saw a lot of other pheasants flying, sitting on top of a tree, on top of the largest trunk of a tree, branch of a tree. And then he went and talked to one of the buffaloes there, and basically a bull. And he was going and crying, when I was young, I used to be able to fly so much. Today I can't. I don't know what to do. The bull basically said, if I tell you something, will you just do it without asking me questions? He said, fine. I'm not going to lose anything. I eat a whole lot of stuff, and I pass my dung. The dung, right? So start eating from my dung every day. You will get a lot of nutrition, and you will fly. The pheasant said, what nonsense? Why am I going to be eating your dung? But he said, in any case, I'm not flying, so let me start eating the dung. So he starts eating the dung from the bull. And in 2 weeks' time, he's able to fly to the first branch. 3 weeks' time, he goes to the third branch. And in about 4 weeks, he's right on top of the tree. And there he says, this is a view I have never seen for a long time. You know what got me here? He was thinking. And then there was this farmer who was sitting down, and he said, oh my God, I was just wondering what would I do for my meal in the afternoon. He took a shotgun and then shot it down. Then the pheasant died. So the moral of the story is, even bullshit can take you to the top. you need to know. And I don't want to take credit for this. It was Sadhguru's story, but he said it a lot more eloquently than I did. But I thought, if I can offer a little bit in terms of what growth can be in a VUCA world, that was it.